Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for attending the Thales and Netpoleon Data Protection and Cloud Access Management Partner Bootcamp. I'm Robert Madrid, the Product Manager of Thales Products in Netpoleon Solutions Philippines, Inc. Netpoleon is a value-added distributor of Thales products in the Philippines. Welcome to Thales Data Protection and Cloud Access Management Partners Bootcamp. In this webinar session, all of you will learn the in-depth product solutions of Thales products for general purpose Luna HSM, Cybertras data security platform, and safely trusted access features and benefits which help every organizations to secure their data and to better manage their security posture. To begin with our first speaker, with over 15 years of experience in cybersecurity industry, he has been designing and implementing security solutions and providing security consultancy. Ivan has the experience with various security solutions ranging from network to systems and well-versed with security architecture and best practices covering the ASEAN region. Ivan now provides guidance to customers in solving their business problems via Thales technologies. He is a security CCIE with a bachelor's degree in mechanical engineering. Let's welcome Ivan Tan, the Regional Sales Thales Engineer for Cloud Protection and Licensing. Before we proceed on Ivan's talk, kindly see on the screen the list of possible questions which we include on the question and answer game later via Kahoot. This platform is over to you, Ivan.
I see a very full attendance today. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us. So let me start. Today, my name is Ivan. I'm the sales engineer from Thales Cloud CPL, Cloud Protection and Licensing. So I'll be presenting the use cases of the Thales Luna HSMs, which is actually the foundation of digital trust that everyone uses right now. All right. Thales point of view, what Thales likes to say is that how do you protect your organization's data, right? So Thales, according from the Thales point of view, what we are saying is that you should protect your data by firstly encrypting your data, definitely. Once you've encrypted your data, you protect and manage the keys that's used to encrypt the data, right? And once that's done, you will also need to provide access control to these encryption keys. Because encryption is not enough, right? You really need to control who can access the keys. What is the point of encrypting your data if you don't control who can access the keys to these data? And the keys, as we all know, are really the foundation of digital trust, right? And what is the HSMs really used for? HSMs are really the foundation of this digital trust because they provide the secure storage, right? For these cryptographic keys, and this whole HSMs have been really used for providing this digital trust to all these the technologies that you're already quite familiar with, like PKI, like code signing, right? So all these have traditionally been protected by HSMs for 25 years. The technology you're familiar with, like the PKI environments, like the code signing, like SSL acceleration, like database encryption. So these are all use cases or technologies that you are already familiar with. A lot of your customers have already been using HSMs for these purposes. But we have over the years there's a lot more new use cases for HSMs because people realize that HSMs are really the most secure area, the most secure environment for cryptographic keys to exist. So hence they will extend the HSM use cases to a lot more new technologies like 5G deployments, like bring your own key, like blockchain environments, IoT. So all of these are HSM use cases. We can actually use HSM to enhance the security for all of these different these new technologies. All right, so I will go through all of this. IoT also is essentially IoT is just an environment of devices, right, that actually communicates to each other. These devices can be really small devices, can be large-scale deployments. So all of this IoT, Internet of Things, they are connecting to each other, and when they connect to each other, there really is a need for secure communication, because you don't want these communications to be intercepted and modified, right? So the HSMs, right, will use, or rather the IoT will use PKI to issue identities to all of these devices, secure identities, right? PKI will be responsible for issuing the certificates, and these certificates can be injected into these IoT devices. So these encryption keys for this certificate issuing will be stored inside the HSM again, because the HSMs are again the most secure storage area for these certificates and master keys, right? HSMs. Blockchain, right? So blockchain is essentially just a record of transactions. It's a huge ledger. It contains a record of transactions, any kinds of transactions, right? Each of these transactions, right? Whenever you perform a transaction, whenever any user in the blockchain performs a transaction, they will have to authorize themselves already, provide their identity to prove they are who they say they are. These are done via signing exercises. You need to be able to sign a transaction using a digital signature. So again, PKI is used for this kind of requirement, and HSMs again are used to store these certificates and provide strong access control to the signing keys. So imagine, if you have like a lot of Bitcoin, you want to make sure that the signing key of your Bitcoin is protected in the most secure fashion available, and that is the HSM, right? So the last use to talk about is the digital signatures, right? So this is what I'm talking about is more on a remote signing. EIDAS is a European regulation, or that actually governs the European countries on how they can perform remote signing, right? So because this is a very important infrastructure, because these electronic digital signatures are really legally binding, right? So we must make them as secure as possible. So EIDAS has placed, the guidelines on how to ensure remote signing is done, and the use of a HSM is mandated for the generation and protection and the use of these remote signing keys, right? So we can actually perform this remote signing. You don't actually have to own you don't actually have to store the certificates in non-secure environments like the laptops anymore. You can still keep these certificates in a very secure environment like the HSM, while still having access to these certificates to perform this remote signing, right? So I actually have an actual use case on this. I'll talk about it a bit later, right? So the most interesting use case that personally for me right now, and I think what is going to be a very popular use case in the future, because a lot of your customers are really going to cloud and multiple cloud, right? So what we have right now, Thales and Google has actually worked together very, very closely to come up with this infrastructure to allow customers to actually hold their own key, hold their own cloud keys, right? So Google Cloud is just one of the many cloud platforms available, and they also have their own native encryption, right? So when you store data in the Google Cloud, you can actually use Google's encryption to encrypt the data, your sensitive data in Google Cloud, right? And as I mentioned earlier, there's the BYOK approach, where you can actually generate your key on-premise using a HSM, and you can upload this key for Google Cloud to store and to use, right? But the problem is that Google still has, still stores these keys in the cloud itself. What this new offering is that you can actually, instead of allowing Google Cloud to store these keys, you can actually store these keys away from the Google Cloud. So this is what we call a HYOK, or hold your own key approach, right? Google is one of the pioneers in this. One of the new only cloud providers that actually provides this kind of approach, where you can actually where they allow the customers to store the encryption keys outside of Google Cloud, and Google Cloud will request the keys from these the third-party providers or external key manager, right? So Thales and Google they have worked together to provide this infrastructure, right? And how it works, right? So in the Google Cloud, we have this the key ring, right? In the Google Cloud environment, key rings are the object that is used to store all of the data encryption keys, right? Without an external key manager prompt the user for a digital certificate, and when that is prompted, the application will ask the operating system, what certificates do you have, right? So what Trust will do is it will check the identity of that user against the user's company's Active Directory or user directory, and it will check what is the permissions, what certificates does this user have access to, and under what conditions. Once that's all done, an audit record is done, and it will provide a list of available certificates to that application, the application that was requesting for the certificates, right? So Trust will then perform all of the cryptographic operations outside of the end user's machine. And there's no certificate stored inside the user's machine. There's no cryptography performed inside the user's machine. Everything is done outside. Everything is done remotely. So it's a very convenient way for you to allow remote signing to be done, right? The next use case is blockchain, right? That's it. I really hope that this gives you some ideas on where else you can use the HSMs in the Philippines, Philippines customers, and I really hope that you can consider proposing these whenever, for example, the cloud, whenever customers are looking for more security in the cloud, more security in the IoT, consider the HSMs as a must for these proposals. Thank you very much.
So let's talk about the Cybertras data security platform and Philippine use case. Let's have our next speaker, who is a cybersecurity professional and is a current system engineer at NSPH Inc. His job focused on both pre-sales and post-sales. He has more than 4 years of cybersecurity experience in IT and security and handles different security solutions such as next-generation firewall, endpoint, firewall policy management, NDR, IAM, HSM, and data encryption solutions. So let's welcome the Thales Systems Engineer of Netpoleon, Mr. Edward Merced. This platform over to you, Edward.
Please advise if you could see my screen. I think it's reflecting already. All right. So first and foremost, I'm be discussing the Cybertras data security platform. So thank you everyone for attending this partner enablement or maybe this partner bootcamp which we are hosting with collaboration with our vendor Thales. So first I'll be discussing some marketing, some overview. As you can see here, wherein there's an enterprise-wide data security. How do we implement this? How do we comply for this one? Like for example, there's an explosive data growth when it comes to the global data, wherein it's around 175 zettabytes. Then operational complexity, wherein more than around 39% are having complexity when it's come to the operation of their data. Then evolving compliance requirements as well. And in addition to that, data breaches are occurring around the world. As of 2019, in my slide, there are around 7.9 billion. But as days pass by or as we go by with our daily work, there's still breaches occurring. So how do we translate this complexity, like for example, poor visibility, poor security, and poor control of our data? So around 43% of sensitive data are unencrypted in the cloud, wherein 53% only of organizations have controls also of their keys in their encrypted data in the cloud. So I'll be introducing to everyone Cybertras data security platform, wherein it can discover any sensitive data, protect and control all of those wherever It could be either in your data centers and it could be in your public cloud as well. So why do we choose, or what are the top reasons why we select or we choose the Cybertras Manager? One is the simplified management, wherein it's already the unified console for our data discovery solution, and also our multi-cloud key management, which is what we call Cybertras Cloud Key Manager. Then better self-service licensing, and it also has friendly REST API for automation and integration with other solutions. Another is cloud enhancements, wherein it supports multiple cloud providers, wherein we could deploy our Cybertras Manager either in your private cloud, like for VMware, for example, public cloud as well for AWS, Azure, OpenStack, Hyper-V, and more public and private clouds are coming as well. Then security and crypto, as we all know, because we are dealing with crypto operations, so the Cybertras Manager could have a built-in HSM option, wherein you could purchase an embedded HSM, or you could integrate it with a network HSM. So cloud HSM also, just like what was discussed in the previous slide, could be an option as well for major cloud providers. And appliance improvement as well, because it has high-speed interfaces already, and also we could do NIC bonding already as well. Then stronger authentication with PIN entry device, or what we call PED. System level data protection, or what we call CTE, Cybertrust Transparent Encryption. It meets the need for the compliance regulation and for encryption and limiting the operating system access control. So it could do centralized control across physical or virtual data centers, and could be also via cloud as well. Then we also have CTE, or Cybertrust Transparent Encryption, for AWS S3 buckets. So if you have customers, or if you have leads or opportunities wherein there's a need for CTE file encryption for AWS S3, we could comply to those as well. Another is for Microsoft Azure storage. So we could comply as well for SMB file shares. Then in this slide, you could see the extensions or additional solutions or software of CTE. So currently available now is the LDT, SAP HANA, while on the roadmap, maybe possibly for this first quarter, is for the container security, efficient storage, and Teradata. So one of the things that I'll be highlighting here is the live data transformation, or what we call LDT of Cybertras. So this LDT, this is on top of our CTE agent solution. So you would be procuring another license for this, wherein you would not have a zero downtime during deployment already, and seamless key rotation. What do we mean by this one? So as we all know, when we are doing encryption or key rotation, there is a need for us to take the database down or the application down, because during encryption, it should be down or not doing any application stuffs or anything. So by the use of the LDT, there is no need anymore to take the application down. So we could still have a zero downtime deployment for this one. And also, when doing key rotation, because you would be decrypting, after encryption, decrypting the sensitive data and applying another key to encrypt it. So with LDT, there's no need anymore to have a downtime as well for key rotation. Application layer data security. We have here some examples, but commonly what we are highlighting or proposing to our customers are encryption, tokenization, and masking, data masking. So as we all know, for encryption, but first, all of these have code changes. But the major difference between encryption and tokenization is, for encryption, there would be a change in the database schema of the customer, while tokenization is there is no changes in the database schema. How do we apply, or how do we integrate the application level data protection via RESTful tokenization? So this is an example wherein we are securing the credit card data. First, let's say, for example, John Doe would input his input his data in the web server. After inputting his data in the web server wherein it's clear text, the application would call or would integrate it with the tokenization server via REST API. Then after calling it via REST API, it would encrypt already the data either via tokenization or via encryption, then store it to the database server already. Another use case is the Cybertras key management, wherein we could centrally store all of the encryption keys as long as it is supported either via the TDE key management, via the Cybertras Cloud Key Manager, wherein I'll explain in the next slides as well what is the Cybertras Cloud Key Manager. Then also for the PKCS11 or our application encryption solution. Then for the KMIP clients for our data storage vendors and the big data like for Dell EMC and Thales. So in my next slide, I'll be discussing about the Cybertras Cloud Key Manager. So for the Cybertras Cloud Key Manager, it supports our multi-cloud key lifecycle management, wherein we support AWS, Azure, and O365. So FIPS 140-2 is certified because operations efficiency.
Sa'yo pa yung
It's FIPS 140-2 certified. Then it is efficient in our operations by having key visibility and usage in our multi-cloud setup, as well as automatic or automation of key rotation as well. In addition to that, disaster recovery could be done or is done as well via our CCKM or Cybertras Cloud Key Manager, wherein we have our own key escrow. So the keys are stored in the infrastructure and not only in the specific cloud as well. So deployment, it could be as a service or it could as a service via the Cybertras Manager. And again, what we support as of now is under the AWS and Azure. Then for SaaS is for O365, which is high availability in the production. Then one in the disaster recovery side of the customer. But if there's if it's budget constraint and there's need to tight down the cost, we could deploy only one Cybertras Manager, but we need to share also the downside or the consequences if they would be deploying only one Cybertras Manager. Then afterwards, depending on the use case of the customer or their needs, we could deploy either the CTE file system encryption, the CTS for the up level or tokenization for the up level, then key management if they need to store their keys, encryption keys in the Cybertras Manager, and also the data discovery and classification of Cybertras data security platform as well. Next is the use cases of Cybertras data security platform. One of the major use cases which we really need to comply is really for compliance regulations. As we all know, here in the Philippines, customers are complying, for example, for GDPR, even though this is European Union based. Then we have also for PCI DSS compliance. Then primarily our own Data Privacy Act, which is the Philippines Data Privacy Act. So that's all for my end.
To move on with our last speaker, he is an information security professional with over a decade of cybersecurity experience with a specialization in information security domains that mainly includes identity access management, multi-factor authentication, data loss prevention, security events and information management, privileged identity management, access control, cloud security, and other security experience. Also includes vulnerability assessments and penetration testing to application security, to security solutions to governance, risk, and compliance. He is certified with CCISSP, CISM, CCSK, ITILB, and worked with for more than 10 global information security certifications. Let's welcome Umesh Arya, the Regional Sales Engineer for ASEAN.
All right, I hope you guys can see me. Hi everyone, good evening. My name is Umesh Arya and I am the Regional Sales Engineer with Thales, taking care of the whole ASEAN region and primarily focused on identity and access management suite of products. We'll start with the IAM product portfolio, and we'll see how what Thales has in order to protect the identities across your organization. We'll see some of the use cases and some of the live demo, in action. Whatever we are talking, we'll really see that how things really work and how we can set up different type of use cases and see them actually in action. So SafeNet Trusted Access is nothing but a cloud-based identity and access management system. It has three core foundational pillars, starting off with the modern authentication, which basically provides you a wide range of different authenticators, like biometric, hardware-based authentication, OTP push, software tokens. You can use Windows Hello or certificate-based authentication. So this provides you basically a wide range of authenticators which you can use in order to securely log into various different applications. The applications can be VPN, it can be a web application, or it can be Windows, Linux, doesn't really matter. So we provide you the widest range of authenticator choice to choose from, starting with just the traditional form of authentications like SMS or email-based authentication, to the very the modern-based authentications like Windows Hello and FIDO as well. Now, talking about the second pillar, which is, I think, also very important, is the smart single sign-on. Right? The reason being, when you enforce a lot of authentication, create a lot of policies, and protect your application, which is really a lot of friction for the end user. The end user will have difficulty every time proving themselves to log into the application. Right? So every time, if an application is being accessed like 10 times in a day, and the user has to every time prove themselves, it becomes, from the user convenience perspective, that's not very good or convenient kind of an experience. So that is why what is required or is basically a smart single sign-on feature, which is nothing but a policy-driven single sign-on. So you give the control to the customer, and the customer will basically, based on their security policies, they will define when and how an application is being accessed, and whether or not the application which the user is accessing requires multi-factor authentication, or will it work based on the single sign-on. So what you're doing here basically is you're giving the control to the customer itself to manage the security applications based on their security posture, based on their requirement. Right? So the third pillar, which is the brain, or I would say, of the solution, is basically the policy-based access. So the policy-based access gives you again the control to define various policies, and based on the policies, you can decide when multi-factor authentication is required, when it is not required, when the user has to do a step-up authentication if the policy says so. If the application is really critical and you want to enforce and step up authentication regardless of where it is accessed, you can define that policy, and with that the user will be challenged to. Right? So the wide range of authenticators, like what I was just talking about, as you can see on the screen, this is what we are talking about. So we have the traditional form of authenticators, which is just the password-based authentication or SMS or email-based authentication, which is, I'm saying traditional because this is something which is not very secure way of authentication, but due to legacy reasons, we have seen our customers still using the SMS or email-based authentication. Right? Talking about the modern authentication, where we have both passwordless and tokenless approach. So the passwordless is where you don't need to enter any password. All that you will need to do is basically approve a push notification which is being sent to your mobile, right? So you can use a push-based authentication in this case, or for the used cases like where you cannot carry mobile to install a software token on that, or where you cannot carry it because of the customer policy, or you cannot carry a hardware token, we also have something called a tokenless approach, where you just need to log in with a grid, with the 5 by 5 matrix or a 7 by 7 matrix, which works based on PIP concept. PIP is nothing but personally identifiable pattern. So at the time of enrollment of the token, the user will choose a pattern, and based on that pattern, the user has to log in to the Windows system, or maybe to Linux, or maybe any web environment, right? Web applications. So the idea is basically to resolve or mitigate the risk of logging on to those applications which requires strong factor authentication, but due to security reasons you cannot carry your mobile, or you cannot install, or you cannot carry a hardware token inside a data center. So this is one of the example, but there can be many others as well. Where you will need a tokenless approach rather than going with the hardware token or a software token which gets installed on your mobile, right? So other than that, there is something called adaptive. I think the adaptive falls back to the policies again. You define a policy and you say, okay, this when a user is authenticated once, the following access attempts would be allowed without proving themselves. So the user can simply rely on the single sign-on session, and based on that he can authenticate automatically at the backend. So there are some pre-integrated catalog of applications that are readily available with us, more than 200 plus, readily available for the administrators to basically integrate with our solution. As you can see, most of the enterprise applications like Zscaler, Dropbox, Palo Alto, F5, so you name it, and we already have a pre-integrated catalog which you can use basically to integrate the application with us. And using our user portal, you can simply log in to that portal, right? Using user portal. So what if there is an application which is not readily available, right? What you do in that case? So we also have something called generic template, which basically allows you to integrate any application, any customized application that supports SAML or OIDC based protocol. So if it is an application which is on-prem and supports SAML, so you can integrate that application with us and apply the same set of contextual or adaptive policy, whatever we just discussed now, and enforce the user to either log in successfully with just SSO session, or enforce the user to do an step of authentication. So we're talking about a new world. A new world means a hybrid world, right? Where none of your customers will have all on-prem applications, right? They will be having a mixture of on-prem and cloud application, right? So and you will see a different set of users, and definitely, like the IT admins, standard users, or the C-suite users, partners, vendors. So you'll see different set of users and having a different level of access. And if you try to manage the system without an identity provider like SafeNet Trusted Access, just imagine how many identities are you going to provision for accessing all those different applications, right? How many policies you will have to create in order to manage the user experience, in order to manage the security and create a balance. So it would be really huge and drastic, and the complexity increases as we are moving to a more cloud-based environments, right? But moving to cloud it's a gradual process. It cannot happen overnight. So there has to be certain way to manage both your on-prem application as well as cloud application, and that's where our SafeNet Trusted Access fits in, right? So what it provides you is basically a single seamless experience, a passwordless experience. So you get a single identity to log in to all the applications that you can see on the right hand side. It doesn't matter whether it is on-prem or whether it is on cloud, right? And the three layers, the three foundational pillars that I talked about, MFA, SSO, and access policies, that's something which controls what will happen, whether the user is allowed to log in seamlessly, or whether the user will be asked to do a step-up authentication based on the policies that that the customer will create based on their internal security policies. So this is the integration methods that we use today. So you talk about all different kind of cloud applications or on-prem application, right? So for example, we're talking about Office 65, we're talking about AWS or Azure. So we can integrate with all those cloud applications using SAML or OIDC protocol. But what about the legacy application on-prem application? For example, logging into a VPN system using multi-factor authentication, right? That's something which is also possible using Radius protocol. So we support various form of integration methods. For example, Radius, SAML, OIDC. We also have API-based authentication. So if there is any legacy web application, for example, we're just talking about JBoss with one of our customer recently, where they have access to the source code, but there is no agent that exists. So they will have to really change the source code of the application which is hosted on JBoss and use our APIs to redirect their authentication request from the web application in order to authenticate successfully. Yeah, and we do integrate with the Active Directory as well. So all the users will be synchronized from the Active Directory to the cloud apps. Now that brings to another question, which is like, what data are you basically synchronizing? And that's something which we always hear from our customer, because they are concerned about what is being basically synced from Active Directory. So in our synchronization method, basically we used double hash encryption. So we don't just synchronize the password of the Active Directory. So what we do basically is we double hash it, and then we send it to the cloud. And on top of that, I think this is also very important to understand that we do not synchronize a whole lot of information. We just need the first name, last name, email ID, and the user ID of the user. And to that point, if the customer says, we are not comfortable to basically integrate our Active Directory or synchronize our on-prem users, so that's also one of the feedback which we always get from customers. So in our case, we give the luxury to the customer, and we let customers choose whether they want to really integrate or whether they want to really synchronize the passwords or just synchronize the user information. So that's something which is also configurable. So yeah, based on the organization policy, based on what their risk capability is, we either allow or we do not, right? So the next thing which I'm going to talk about is the use cases. How STAR is being used by most of customers, and the first use case over here. This is one of the healthcare organization in Philippines, which basically uses SafeNet Trusted Access for mainly three use cases. Number one is Office 65. You might have you must be already aware that the Office 65 adoption is really very high nowadays. People are just moving to Office 65 due to various reasons, like highly available, the cost of setting up the application, and the various other reasons for accessing cloud, right? So they also have a lot of Office 65 domains, and what they wanted was basically to securely access the Office 65 application with a multi-factor authentication solution, right? So you may say that Microsoft also has their own authenticator. So why STAR? Why SafeNet Trusted Access, right? That's the common question which normally customers ask us. So with SafeNet Trusted Access, you are you are not only just protecting Office 65, right? That's just one use case, but you can also protect various other applications, other systems which are hosted on-prem, which are or on cloud. So this gives you the capability to basically protect not only Microsoft based products but also various different form of devices and applications. Like over here we are talking about Windows login, right? So you can protect Windows login, you can protect Azure login, you can protect Office 65, you can also protect VPN, you can protect operating systems login to Windows or Linux, and so many other things. And we will really see that in our demo today, how you can use one single system to protect those different applications, right? So we are talking about a hybrid environment, right, where the customers will have legacy application, the customers will have their modern applications, and they will be so different, different types of permutations and combinations. So the system which the customer is choosing for for managing their identity and access management should be capable of integrating with various touch points with the various different types of devices, right? That's very important, because you don't want to manage or have a segregated approach to manage your identities. You cannot maintain 10 different systems to manage different type of applications. Yeah, so there has to be one application or one identity and access management solution that gives you the luxury to manage everything, right? So over here, SafeNet Trusted Access was basically used to manage Office 65, log into the Azure portal, and also protecting their Windows logon, which was on the endpoint side on the laptops, as well as the servers. So everything was managed through one single platform. So that's where we are talking about the benefits, right? You use one centralized portal to manage everything, regardless of whether it is on-prem or whether it is on cloud. Now, coming back to the benefits, because it is a cloud solution, definitely you no need to worry about setting up your primary data center and then setting up your secondary data center, and then you talk about disaster recovery, and you talk about creating your or managing it on a daily basis. So patching the servers. So you don't really have to do all that stuff, because that is something which is managed by us, right? So all that you do is just subscribe to the solution, and you're ready to go. And the POC of the solution itself takes about 1 or 2 days to set up everything, and on the third day, customer is ready to ready to go with the solution, right? So that's what we are talking about. And again, coming back to the benefits, we have the broadest choice of two-factor authentication methods. That is something which I have already discussed. And the overall TCO of managing the solution, because our licensing, the way how we license is something which is really different, and this is something that is competitive enough in the market. So the overall TCO to manage the solution is really low, right? So other than that, STAR is also a multi-tenant architecture. So if a customer has various different branches across or availability or presence in different kind of countries, so they can just have one solution purchased at one location, and the same solution can be further extended to various parts or various offices. So I have a small scenario here. As you can see on the screen, I have my good friend James. So James is a privileged user. So he's a privileged user. He has access to various applications. As you can see on the screen, he accesses Office 65, Azure, Zoom, Salesforce, and AWS, right? So what I mean, in absence of STAR, James would have like access to each applications with different IDs, different passwords. Managing those passwords would have been really a nightmare. But with STAR, all that what he has to do is use the same user ID James, and with that he has to log in to each of those application, right? And the best part is he can use various forms of authenticators. For example, in order to log into Office 65, he uses FIDO plus PIN, right? He uses a FIDO based authenticator. But in order to log into Azure, he can use FIDO plus PIN plus push based authentication, And in order to log into Zoom, he can use Windows Hello and push-based authentication. But let's say if Salesforce is considered as a highly critical application, he can use a PKI certificate to log into Salesforce. Similarly, to log into AWS, he can use GridSure or push-based OTP. So you see, there are different type of authentication methods that you can choose from, and all that is available in one single solution, which is SafeNet Trusted Access. Right. On top of those, you get a choice of managing the managing whether you allow a smart single sign-on based on the policies you configure, and to improve your security and convenience part, right? So let's quickly go one by one and see how the whole thing works out, right? So first thing which I'm going to showcase you is how James can log into an Office 365 application using FIDO plus PIN. Right? So let me share my. So this pass was missing, so I had to close that session and open it again. So as you can see here, it says welcome to Office, and I click on sign in. Right. So first thing which I'm asked is enter your sign in username. Right. So what I do is I enter James at bigcorp.ml. So that's my user ID. So now I am in Office 365 page now, and you can see that James at bigcorp.ml is what the user ID I am giving here. So when I click on next, it will redirect me to SafeNet Trusted Authentication, because the bigcorp.ml is the organization account. That organization account is being federated in Azure in Office 65, and it is being integrated with Star. So what I do here is just enter the same username James, right? And what it says is basically enter the PIN, because this Office 65 is being protected with a FIDO policy. So over here, if you can see, we are getting an option over here to enter the security key and touch the security key, right? So I'm going to enter my PIN first, and then I'm going to touch my token. With that, it will allow me to log in. So I'm going to enter my PIN, and the next thing it is saying is, oops, it's timed out, because I took a lot of time to basically enter PIN. I'll do it again one more time, this time a little bit faster. So, and then I have to touch my token. So I'm going to touch it, and you see that I'm logged into Office 65, right? So that's how easy and convenient it is for me to basically just enter a PIN and touch the token to log into Office 65, right? So with this, that completes our first use case demo, which is logging onto Office 65 with a FIDO plus PIN authenticator, right? Now, why it is asking me FIDO plus PIN is because I have created a policy at the backend saying that if any user logging onto bigcorp.ml domain, he has to prove themselves or herself or himself using FIDO plus PIN, and this is only applicable to Office 65. Okay, if the same user James try to access to an Azure portal, the experience will be different, right? Over here we are talking about three things: FIDO plus PIN plus push. So they will the user will have to enter FIDO plus PIN first, and then a push notification will be sent to James' mobile phone, and he will have to approve that request. So a similar use case, but with this slight change here, where we are asking the user to also authenticate with a push-based authentication, right? So let's do that. So I'm going to close the session and open a new session, and I'm going to access portal azure.com, right? And over here, the same thing, James at bigcorp.ml. So the same user is accessing a different application this time. I'm not accessing Office 65, I'm accessing Azure. So Azure has a different policy which I have set at the backend. So this time, when I try to log in to Azure, it will again redirect me to IDP, the SafeNet Trusted Access, right? It is asking me to prove myself again. So I enter my user ID again, and you see I have to enter my PIN. So I enter my PIN and touch the token to log in. right? That's what we did last time. But this time it is also asking me for a push-based authentication, right? That's the another factor which we have added. So FIDO plus PIN, that's something which we have done. The third factor is push. So that's what we need to do now. So what we do is basically send a push notification. So when we send a push notification, I get a notification on my mobile, and all that I need to do is just approve the request. So when I approve the request, and I've just approved the request on my mobile, and you will see that I am able to log into the application, right? So I'm able to log into Azure portal. Now, why I have three, or rather two different set of authenticators here? Because as per my organization, as per bigcorp.ml organization, Azure is being accessed by the administrator to access their various resources, virtual machines, databases, which is really critical. So what they want is basically to have an additional multi-factor of authentication. So FIDO is just not enough for them. They want the user to also authenticate with the push-based authentication, and that's what I just shown you. I have approved my FIDO request, and after that I also approved my push-based authentication, and only after successful authentication I'm able to log into the Azure portal, right? So that's the second use case which I wanted to demonstrate. The third use case which I want to talk about is accessing Zoom, right? With the kind of situation where we are, where everyone is working from home, Zoom is something which is really important. Everybody is accessing Zoom, and how can we protect really the to log into Zoom with a multi-factor authentication solution, or rather not just multi-factor authentication, but a secure way of authentication system, or modern authentication system. So in this case, we have a different policy here created for this application, which is push and Windows Hello. So we are going to use the Windows Hello and push-based authentication to log into Zoom application, right? So in order to do that, let me quickly open a demo which I have already created. So over here, you can see that I have a Zoom application on the desktop. So what I'm going to do now is open Zoom, right? And you see there are three different methods over here: single sign in with SSO, Google, and Facebook. That's what is supported, authentication method supported by Zoom Cloud. So I'm going to use the sign in with SSO feature. So once I do that, you see that it will ask you what is your company domain. In my case, in my previous example, it was bigcorp.ml, but over here I am using a company domain called Harulucky. So I just use harulucky.zoom.us, and I will just continue to log in. And when I continue, I get redirected to again SafeNet trusted access over here, because that domain is being again protected by us, and the experience will be the same. I enter my user name James, and I click on login here. So when I click on login, one thing you will notice over here is it has a send push option, which you have already seen in my previous demo. So when I click on send push, this time it will ask me to authenticate with Windows Hello. So you will see that a small Windows Hello screen that will pop up, and with that I will have to use my facial recognition. It will use a facial recognition technology, and it will basically ensure that the user is the right user, and then it will allow me to log in. So let's see in action. So we have the send push option. I'm going to just click on send push over here. Okay, so I click on send push, and as soon as I do that, there will be a pop-up. You see, this is the push notification. When I click on approve, that's when the pop-up comes in, and over here this is the Windows Hello feature part, right? That says hello James, and click OK to continue. So it will basically recognize my face, and then it will allow, based on that, it will allow me to use. So once I'm recognized, once my identity is validated, it will allow me to access Zoom portal. Yeah, so the request is being approved here, and then I can open Zoom settings, or I can just launch Zoom from there. And once I'm logged in, I can schedule and I can join the session or schedule my meetings. So that's how SafeNet Trusted Access is being used to basically protect Zoom application, right? So that's with that, the third demo case is over. The next demo which I have for today's session is logging on to Salesforce using a PKI certificate, right? So for the PKI certificate, PKI is considered as the high level of assurance to authenticate, right? In as compared to traditional form of authentication like SMS or email. So over here, what we are going to do is we are going to log in to Salesforce application using a PKI certificate. Again, the same user we will be using, which is James. And using James certificate, we will log into a Salesforce application, right? So what are we going to do first is we are going to log into a user portal using James user. So user portal is the centralized portal from where you get access to all the applications, whatever is being granted, whatever application that are being granted to you by your organization, right? So in this case, as I log in, you will see that I can access all those applications from a single portal through SafeNet Trusted Access user portal. So this is what it is. You see that I have Office 365. I've demonstrated already. I have Zoom portal, which I can access directly from this user portal. And I also have Salesforce, Cisco, and Zoho. So, right. So all these portals are readily available for me to be accessed from a single place, right? And you can also see that it gives me a detail of what kind of authenticators do we have. As you can see, I have 4 different set of authentication methods which I'm using currently. So you can see grid shore, pattern based authentication, which we just talked about. Then I have mobile pass plus, which is installed on one of the device, and then another device I have another two software token, and finally I also have SMS based authentication, right? So now going back to our used case, so we'll log into the Salesforce over here, and you see that I have already logged into user portal. So my authentication attempt, my single sign-on is already established because I'm already logged in here. But over here in the Salesforce part, the policy says every time you log into the Salesforce application, you have to authenticate. So when I click on this application, right, it goes back to SafeNet Trusted Access, and it will check. You see that it is asking me to choose the certificate. So James DJ is the certificate which I want to use. So I'm using a SafeNet Trusted Access or a e-token, SafeNet Trusted Access, not SafeNet Trusted Access, but Thales e-token, right? So that's a hardware token which I'm using, and the certificate is over there on my e-token. So I choose this certificate, and it is asking me the PIN. So I need to enter the PIN in order to log into the application. Okay, I think wrong PIN. Okay, so looks like I'm not entering my PIN correctly. I'll try one more time. Works. Oops. Okay, all right. So I'm going to log in onto Salesforce with the PKI based authentication, right? So I'm clicking on Thales IDP over here. So as soon as I do that, I will be redirected to SafeNet IDP, identity provider in this case. So I'm going to enter my username as James. It's all about it. So you accept, you choose the certificate, and then you click on OK. And once you are done with that, you will be allowed to access to the Salesforce. So that's a more secure way of authentication, because you are working on a certificate which is a PKI based authentication, and it is working on a private and public key pair. Yeah, so that's even more secure way of authenticating. So without further wasting time, let me move on to the next use case, which is logging onto an AWS instance. So in AWS instance, I have two machines, which is Ubuntu and Windows, as you can see. And what I'm going to do now is basically logging onto each of these systems independently with push-based OTP, right? So this is something which I have also a recorded session for you guys. So let's quickly see what is the experience when you log in using SafeNet Trusted Access to a Windows system. So this Windows system is on AWS. So what I'm going to do is access this using an RDP session. Right, let me just forward it a little. Yeah, so this is the system which is on AWS, right? This is my AWS IP, and I'm going to try to connect that using the same user, which is James, right? So the same user is accessing a Windows system, which is using RDP on an AWS instance, right? So when I try to do that, what happens next is basically I'm asked to enter my OTP credentials, right? So in this case, I'm going to use a push-based authentication. So I'm being asked to enter my OTP. So all that I'm going to do is initiate a push-based notification here with the letter P. So I enter my letter P there and click on OK. It will generate a push-based notification, and the notification comes on to my mobile device, which I am also showing on the demo video. So this is my mobile application where I have a software token installed. So you can see that a push notification will be generated as soon as I click on OK. Yeah, so all that I need to do is just approve the request using my fingerprint on the mobile device. So when I approve the request, I'm able to log in to the operating system, right? So that's a quick way of accessing Windows system using the push-based authentication, right? But there is another way. The other way is to log in with the tokenless approach, which we just talked about, right? So this time, instead of initiating a push request, what I'm going to do is I'm going to log in with the grid-based authentication, right? So I'm logging into the same system, which is hosted on AWS. I'm entering my AD password first. When I enter my AD password, I'm being given this login screen where I enter G this time. G is for grid-based authentication. So I enter G and click OK. So instead of sending a push notification, it will generate a grid-based authentication. So you see that I have a 5x5 matrix over here, you see, and then all that I need to do is basically enter whatever is my pattern, the pattern which I initially set during the enrollment process, right? So that's another way of logging in, and that is what I was talking about. It's a tokenless approach. It's the tokenless approach because I need not to carry any tokens, hardware tokens, or I need not to install anything on my mobile for a push-based authentication. It's just a 5x5 matrix, and using that grid-based authentication, I will be able to log into the system. So all that I need to do is enter a pattern, and the pattern is something which I initially set during the enrollment process. Right, so you see that I just entered my personally identifiable pattern PIP, and I'm able to log in. So none of even if someone see me logging in, right? So it's secure because first I have to enter my AD password, and then I am entering my pattern, right? So in that way, it's a multi-factor authentication, and I'm logging in without any hardware token or installing any tokens. Right, that's the PIP. Now the second thing, on the same line, what happens if we try to access a Ubuntu system or a Red Hat Linux, right? So what happens? Can we basically do the same thing on Ubuntu, or the push-based authentication and grid-based? So that's what I'm going to show you now on this video. So I'm going to log into Ubuntu server, which is again hosted on AWS. Right. So all that I'm going to do now is enter the same user, James, and enter my password to log into the system. So as soon as I enter my password, you will see what's the next. So the next thing which you see over here is submit P, S, or G. So P stands for push-based authentication, S stands for SMS, and G stands for grid-based authentication. So based on whatever is your response to this login prompt, you will be either getting a push, or you will be getting SMS or a grid. So this time I'm going to first show you a push-based authentication, and then after that we will also see how the grid-based authentication works in a Ubuntu environment. So I'm going to enter P here. Yeah. So when I enter P, and you see that I get a push notification on my mobile. And all that I need to do is just approve this request with my fingerprint. Once it is approved, I'm able to log into the system. Right. So that's the push-based authentication experience on an Ubuntu system. The next one I want to show is the same experience using a grid-based authentication. So we'll use the same user, James, and instead of logging in with a push-based authentication, this time we are going to use a grid-based authentication. Right. So grid-based authentication, for that I have to just enter G. So when I enter G, you see that I have the same grid which is being created here, whatever you saw over there on Windows system. So all that I need to do is just enter my pattern again. Right. So enter my pattern again, and when I enter that, I'll be allowed to log in. Yeah. So I'm allowed to log in. I'm already authenticated using the pattern-based authentication. Right. So that was my last demo for today, and we covered like 5 different type of devices, 5 different type of authentication methods using one platform, which is SafeNet Trusted Access. Right. So moving on to the next slide, which is the key takeaways. So what we learned today basically is, the industry is just moving away from the traditional form of authentication to high assurance authentication methods. For example, PKI, or using the FIDO based authentication or biometric based authentication. And the reason being, because of the dynamics which we have in our workforce today. People are working from home. There are a lot of cloud adoption. So the identities are just, very hard to manage. So what we need is basically a centralized way of logging on to each of the application, regardless of whether it is on-prem or on cloud. What is required is basically a centralized identity provider who can not only give you various form of authentication methods to capture or to basically serve all those different type of use cases that you may have, the traditional and the advanced form of authentication, and also gives the control to the customer itself, based on, because every customer, every organization will have their own security policies. They will have their own risk appetite, right? So based on their risk appetite, based on their security policy, they will have to choose which authentication method they want on one device or one application. Which authentication method do they want to do it opt for the other authentication device or application, right? It cannot be same for everything. But if that is the case, why there is something critical and why there is something not critical, right? That's how we define the application. That's how we define the devices, right? So based on the criticality of the application, based on the criticality of the applications or devices, we give you option to basically choose which authentication method do you want to use. And once you know which authentication method do you want to use, are you able to provide convenience by creating the different type of policies adhering to the various basic principle of cybersecurity, which is by providing least privilege and giving access only based on need to know basis and things like that, right? So with this star, you can centrally manage all the identities across multiple environments, multiple different type of sites, zones, and with just one identity you can log into all those applications and devices and can have a better visibility and control to your applications and devices and users as well, right? With this, that's pretty much all from my side. And if you have any queries, just feel free to reach out to me, add me on LinkedIn, and let's discuss what you are seeing on the field, and what your customers are talking about identity and access management. With that, I will give it back to Edward. So Edward, over to you.